Hi, I'm George Latimer, and welcome to Meet the Candidates. This year in November, we'll be voting for a number of different positions, starting from the Presidency of the United States down to Village Trustee and Village Justice. But I'll be on the ballot this year on Tuesday, November 6th, running for the New York State Senate in the 37th Senate District that represents about 15 communities across a third of Westchester County. It's the seat from the State Senate currently held by State Senator Susie Oppenheimer, and it is an open seat with two candidates competing. But campaigns, oftentimes being about hoopla and mailings and advertisements, oftentimes doesn't get down to the kinds of issues that may be on your mind. So in this segment of Meet the Candidates, I'm going to be answering some questions that have been posed by people on the campaign trail. I'm joined today by Harrison resident and good friend Joe Derwin, who will be posing those questions, and hopefully out of our dialogue, you'll have a better idea of your choices as we approach November 6th. Joe, thanks for being part of this today.
Thank you, George. Let's get right to the questions.
Sure.
You've served this community for many years in a very dedicated fashion and in several capacities. What prompted you to make the decision to run for the state Senate? Did you have to give up your seat in the Assembly to do so?
Well, I do give up my seat in the State Assembly. When people go to the polls, they'll be voting for a new individual to serve in the State Assembly. So in making this race for the State Senate, it is a decision that I made that will either allow me to serve you in the State Senate or to go back to being a private citizen. The nature of the opportunity in the State Senate, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between the two houses, is that the Senate is a smaller body, and it's a body where the individual senator has more influence and control over public policy decisions. There's 63 members of the state Senate. The Assembly has 150 members, and it's a much larger, more broader-based group of people, but it's more institutionally structured. So my sense is that a state senator can do more for the people of the communities they represent. It's a larger district, almost 3 times as large as an assembly district. So in addition to communities that I have represented, like Mamaroneck and Larchmont, Rye, and Portchester and New Rochelle, I'll be involved in districts, communities that stretch from Yonkers all the way up to Bedford. So it's a much greater, more diverse area. But I think the kinds of issues we have to deal with, and we'll be talking about them, how we're going to get a rein in on property taxes, how we're going to deal with education and the environment, require an aggressive and a dynamic advocate for these communities. And I think I can bring that to the table. But again, I close my service as a state assemblyman at the end of this year, and I hope to have the opportunity to serve in the state Senate to follow.
You mentioned it in your answer there, but what are really the main differences between the Senate and the Assembly?
Well, I think the Senate, as structured, has a couple of responsibilities the Assembly doesn't. They have the ability to confirm state judges and major appointees. The Assembly does not have that opportunity. There are some other structural things. But I think the greatest situation is that in the upper house, as it's thought of when you do your civics class, the individual senator has more of an opportunity to draw public attention to the ideas and the positions that they fight for. The fact that there are less number of voices means that each voice is heard a little more clearly, whether you're in the majority or in the minority. Now, over the years in my government service, because I have a 20-year career in business and a very successful career in hotel development, but in my public career as a member of the city council in my home community in Rye, later in the county legislature as chairman of the legislature, I recognize that holding the title isn't what matters. It matters what you accomplish and how you use the opportunity you have to accomplish things. What any legislator does, Joe, at any level and with any title, is as an advocate, and how strongly and persuasively you advocate for the public policies, the people, and the entities that you represent. As a senator, you can do more in that position. And I think in running for this seat, I bring the right balance, the balance of business experience, the balance of government experience at different levels, so I can sit with a village mayor or a town supervisor and understand their world. I can sit with a corporate executive on the Platinum Mile and understand their world, and out of that process, hopefully, be the best possible advocate for the people that elect me.
This is a very important election, not only for you, but also all over the country. How will the race for the presidency impact your election here, or has it already had any effect? And if so, in what way?
Well, I think the first thing clearly, the presidency of the United States is the premier elected position in the country. Most people in the diners and on the street corners that talk about government and politics and the election will talk about the presidency long before they talk about who's going to be in the state Senate or in Village Hall and so forth. So I recognize that. The presidency attracts voters in a way that no other race does. So for openers, we're going to see a higher turnout, and there'll be more people coming to cast their vote. Now, they cast their vote for the presidency, and then down ballot from the U.S. Senate seat that's in play, judge positions, Congress, state Senate, and then in different communities. In the town of Mamaroneck, there are some local positions open, a town council seat, a judge seat. Village of Mamaroneck will be voting for a majority of their village board in this cycle. And then in other communities, different situations. There is an opportunity for those of us running for those positions to reach a larger electorate with the message that we have. And then also, I think the concerns that we have, represent things that while there are different levels of government and they have unique responsibilities, the climate by which people come to the polls, their happiness, unhappiness, their frustration, what they expect to see their elected officials fight to strive for, that's going to be framed by how they feel about the national scene. And then will be then modified as they look at the state of New York and each of the other different levels. So it's a very impactful environment. And truthfully, anything can happen on the international scene that could affect the presidential race right up to the day before the election. So to some extent, as we're speaking now, there's still more than a month ahead before the election. Anything can happen, and it might pivot these elections in any direction.
We've seen a very combative tone in elections on both sides of the aisle in many races, including the presidential race. Voters are starting to see the same attack-style politics even in local elections right here.
Yeah.
Do you think this style of campaigning will help voters decide whom to vote for?
No, not at all. I think, in fact, it serves as a corrosive part for the process of governing that follows the elections. An election is an opportunity to decide, and generally in our system you have two choices, and that's a good thing. And that we debate options, that we talk about our different positions and how we feel about critical issues is a good thing for the democracy. But when what we've seen happen, and we've seen it at the national level, and it's happened right here in this race, when the accumulation of money that you can spend in a campaign is greater on one side, and they use the money not to talk about their solutions for problems or their personality, what they bring to the dance, but to attack the character and the structure of an opponent, that serves in a negative way. Now, you recognize that the Supreme Court has determined that spending money politically is free speech. So I don't argue with the Supreme Court. We understand that an individual has the right under Citizens United, a corporation has the right to speak as a citizen does. I might not like that or agree with that decision, but that is the law of the land as interpreted by the Supreme Court. So what we've had in this very race that's been very disheartening is my opponent, who I considered, a very affable, reasonable person, when I've dealt with him up to now, has turned in the last month to do nothing but attack ads that I think misrepresent the truth. So I'm afraid this is the world we live in. My job is to fight through that, to make sense to people about what we're going to do to control property taxes, what we're going to do to advance the education of our kids, because that's one of the key issues that we care about, what we're going to do to clean up the environment, how we're going to keep safe communities, and what, as an individual, I'm going to do. And I'm going to try to work through the negative climate that's been created in this race by my opponent and his allies, and stay on the topics of what people care about. And then let them make the decision. If they think that I have the right strategies, I hope to have their vote. If they think that my opponent has the right strategies, then that's how they should vote. But not on the basis of attack ads, on the basis of merit, competence, and how we project ourselves on the issues.
Your campaign for the state Senate here in Westchester is one of the most closely watched campaigns across the entire state, and has tremendous impact on who will control state Senate in Albany. How has this campaign been different so far from those that you have successfully run in the past?
Well, we've touched on the first element of it, which is it has been much more negative on one side, and I think that's disheartening. The Senate race is run over a much larger area than I have run before. The Senate district is almost 3 times as large as the Assembly district that I currently represent. So in places such as Southeast Yonkers and Bedford Hills, in Armonk and in Bronxville and Tuckahoe, there are people that I have not met, I have not represented them before, nor for that matter has my opponent. And so those people are being introduced to 2 people that they don't know, whereas there is some name recognition and some reality in the Mamaronecks and the Ryes and the Portchesters that I've already represented. So that is a new reality for me as I try to go out and talk. And you're doing it in a climate where people frankly don't like or trust politicians. I mean, let's be candid. They think that, we promise everything and we don't deliver, and New York State has had a long history of being dysfunctional and not a representative level of government. Now, I would argue in the last 2 years, you've seen a change under Governor Cuomo's leadership that's fairly dramatic. This year, the year that we're operating in, the budget year right now, we have cut spending, and I've voted twice to cut spending over the last two budgets. We're spending less in state government than we spent in the budget from 2010, 2 years ago. That doesn't turn around a ship of state in a year or two, but it does show progress in the right direction. In this cycle, we have cut income tax, state income tax rates for the vast majority of voters to the lowest level in almost 60 years. That actually happened, and I voted for those things. We cut the MTA payroll tax for businesses of a certain size and below. If you walk down Harrison Avenue stores, Halstead Avenue stores in Harrison, or Mamaroneck Avenue stores in Mamaroneck, or for that matter, Pondfield Road stores in Bronxville, you'll see people who were paying an MTA payroll tax a year ago that are not paying that tax today. Those are actual things that we've done and accomplished. We've got a long way to go. But these kinds of things spread out over a large swath of people represent a change in the direction of the state. And I think that change in the direction of the state has been done with a spirit that is bipartisan rather than hyperpartisan. So I get into a campaign where I'm the subject of partisan attacks at a time where it's bipartisanship that has enabled us to have some success. I think that makes this a different climate and a different race than what I've seen in the past.
Kind of leads into the next question. Mirroring the presidential campaign, there's been an exorbitant amount of money spent already during the state Senate campaign. Okay. I'd like to give you this opportunity to respond to any of the charges that have been leveled against you.
Well, there's a lot of charges that have been leveled against me. I think the important thing to understand is that you look at a fact, and if you don't have the fact in the proper context, it draws you to a misrepresentation of what that fact would make you believe. Let me give you two examples. My opponent said I ducked out of 70 votes as a member of the county legislature. Now, he uses the word ducked out. The actual fact is I missed 70 votes. Sounds pretty bad. 70 votes. That's a lot of votes. Except that I served in the county legislature for 13 years. In those 13 years, we had at least minimum 22 meetings a year. And in each of those meetings, we had at least 20 votes per meeting. You do 13 times 22 times 20, and you get approximately 5,700 votes that I was responsible to take. 5,700, of which I missed 70. I was absent twice for illness. I missed a meeting on a business trip, and I missed an errant vote here and there. My voting record was 98.8%. So the fact of missing 70 votes, you draw the interpretation, oh, he's not diligent, he's not doing his job. You get the whole facts and you realize George was there and working hard and accomplishing a mission. That's the kind of attacks, as one example, that most of the rest represented. I'll give you a second one, a very damning effort. My opponent has said he raised taxes 46%. 46%, that's an outrageous amount of money. How could your taxes go up 46%? When you add up 13 years of taxes, 2% plus 3%, a 1%, a 5%, even the minus percentages, and you add it up over 13 years, that's how you get to the 46%. If you divide it by the number of years, you have less than 4% a year on the average. Now, that number, when added up, makes George Latimer look like a bad taxer. Rob Astorino, the county executive, who was credited with being a person who's coming in to cut taxes, Rob Astorino had more than a double-digit record, too. He served 12 years in the Mount Pleasant Town Council, and he served a few years before that in the Mount Pleasant School Board. Add up the taxes that he voted for, and he's a high double-digit tax and spender. Is Rob Astorino a tax and spender? Hardly anybody would argue that. But this is how you misrepresent a fact, and you draw a conclusion. You want the listener to draw a conclusion that's not fair. That's why my sense, Joe, is the way you clear the air of politics is you have debates. You have the candidates sit side by side, face the camera, talk to people, answer questions, point to their record with substance, and say, by the way, I said I voted to cut the MTA payroll tax, I voted to cut the state income tax. I can give you the bill number and the website. You don't take my word for it. Go online and look for it yourself. When you see it for yourself and you see the vote that I cast and you can actually read the bill, then you can draw your own judgments. And I think that's the best way to clear up this air of negative politics, is draw your own judgment based on facts that are available to you without being interpreted by an opponent.
There has been a great amount of discussion about the new property tax cap on local governments and pension reform. Many have said that the new Tier 6 does not have significant immediate impact, and the tax cap is making life slightly more difficult for local governments when preparing their budgets. These positions are consistent with your beliefs, correct?
Well, they are, and I think it's important to understand. The property tax cap as proposed by Governor Cuomo is extremely popular to this day. 75, 80% of the people, when asked, do you want to see a cap on your property taxes, say yes. However, the bill, the actual physical bill that was passed, while capping property taxes at 2%, did not make a significant relief of mandates. Mandated costs are the costs that the state makes the village of Mamaroneck pay, makes the village of Bronxville pay, makes the town of North Castle pay. So Norm Rosenblum, a very fine man, happens to be a Republican, who is the mayor of the village of Mamaroneck, or Mary Marvin, who's the mayor of the village of Bronxville, have both spoken out against having unfunded mandates, which now force them with a tax cap to make decisions to either cut back basic services or be forced to go up against to and threaten to go over the cap itself. My sense is the governor is going to deliver a series of proposals for mandate relief. But many people who trumpet the tax cap as if it's a solution haven't really looked at whether or not that's going to help us rein in costs, because the real costs are the costs that the state makes the village pay, the excess pension costs. At the county level, the cost of Medicaid, almost 25% of the cost of Medicaid are put on the backs of the county, which means it's coming out of your property tax bill, which is the single biggest reason why your county property taxes in Westchester County are #1 in the nation. Not because of spendthrift politicians, because New York State structures itself differently than Florida, Texas, Connecticut, New Jersey, and making more things go on the property tax than in those states. Rob Astorino, again, I'll quote him again, county executive, said that, and I can paraphrase him, that you're running up a credit card when you have a tax cap without mandate relief. You're running up a credit card bill. And he's right. Now, can we correct these things? Yes, as we go forward. But if we're going to have a campaign, we ought to talk honestly about what the tax cap does and doesn't do. The same is true for Tier 6. Tier 6 is a new pension plan. It involves additional responsibilities that the individual hire will have to be responsible for, greater contribution to their health care and the pension and so forth. But the benefits of Tier 6 don't kick in until A, the person is hired, which begins January of 2013. It does nothing to change the obligations that we have right now for the current retirees. That's what's driving the costs in these communities. And the benefits, at best, won't be shown until at least 10 years down the line, because everybody's operating on a certain amount of that contribution until year 10. Finally, the process for Tier 6 was miserable. It was Albany at its worst. Joe, the bill was presented to the floor at 4 a.m. in the morning. Now, I don't know if you bought a new car ever. Had you ever buy it at 4 a.m.?
No.
Did you ever have papers thrust under your face and say, hey, sign this right now, buy this car right now as is. You don't get to test drive it. You don't get to look at consumer reports. Vote for it now. That's wrong. And I said so to leadership. I broke with my own party, and I walked out on principle. That's what I did. And that's what I think you want to see an Albany representative do. Not just go along with your party, go along with the crowd. Okay, I guess I have to do this. I've been in trouble with governors, county executives, because I've spoken my mind over the years. And I think that's the kind of independence you want. And even if you think I'm wrong on the merit of the issue, it's a debatable topic, you have to admit that's what you need in Albany, independent thinking. And that's what I think I showed on these issues. And we'll see over time exactly how these things play out and whether they are the panaceas that some people think they are. I think the governor is an excellent governor, and I think he can get this ship of state through these rocky waters. But I don't think some of the people who are trumpeting it have a real understanding or a consideration of what's involved in these decisions.
You have said that the tax cap did not provide significant mandate relief, and without it, residents like me would see a reduction in services like fire, police, sanitation, and even education. What are some of the mandates that you would like to see eliminated first?
First one, right off the bat, the county governments have to pay for, roughly speaking, 25% of county Medicaid costs. You've heard county legislators like Judy Myers and Marty Rogowski make this very same point. This is not unusual. There's a bill, A 8644, that I'm a co-sponsor of, that would phase out that mandate. What does that mean? The county, roughly speaking, spends about 1/3 of the property taxes it collects on this mandate. That is a huge amount of money. We collect, the county does, $550 million as a round number in aggregate property taxes, and pays on this single mandate $220 million to the state of New York. That mandate has to be phased out. No other state in the nation makes their county governments pay this mandate. That's out of your property taxes. So let's say, Joe, for the sake of this discussion, you pay $20,000 a year in property taxes. If you pay $20,000 a year in property taxes, you're paying about $5,000 to the county of Westchester, about a quarter of the amount. And you could, in theory, drop the county portion of your property taxes on this one mandate alone, roughly speaking, by a third. That's a significant drop. That's mandate number one. Mandate number two, there's a bill, A 8505, as Casey Stengel used to say, you could look it up, which would cap, along with the property tax, cap the amount that the local government has to pay in excess pension costs. The state determines how much each government has to contribute to make sure that the fund is level each year. The pension fund is level, that it's solvent and properly funded. The state makes that decision. It is a mandated cost that's handed to every town, village, city, the library district in New Rochelle and Mamaroneck, and the fire district in Eastchester. That number needs to be capped if you're going to cap the property taxes, if you want to get relief. The MTA payroll tax, which has an impact on businesses. Now, we eliminated it for small businesses and we eliminated it for schools. We did not eliminate it for local governments. Whether you're in the village of Mamaroneck and you pay about $50,000 a year out of your property taxes to cover the MTA payroll tax for the village, or in the city of Yonkers, where the MTA payroll tax is $700,000. How many cops on the corner in Yonkers? How many firefighters in the firehouse does $700,000 pay? So my sense is that you've got to restart the dialogue on how you're going to fund mass transit. You need to have a reliable stream of funding for the mass transit, but I don't believe that it should come out of a payroll tax that a local government pays, because that's double taxation. You're already paying for the MTA payroll tax the MTA funding through a percentage of your sales tax through mortgage recording tax. So right there, three specific mandates: MTA payroll tax, the cost of pensions, capping the cost of pensions, Medicaid relief. I could give you more, but those are three. They're specific, they're not pie in the sky, and there's legislation in each one of these cases that represents what we ought to do.
Thank you. Legislators often do not have the ability to make sweeping changes on their own, but rather need to form coalitions around ideas and proposals. This has always been a strength of yours locally and with colleagues in the government. What are some of the issues that you would like to tackle in the state Senate?
Well, I think what Governor Cuomo has done with the Medicaid program is the template for how you have to resolve these issues. You need to put the stakeholders involved at the table. In his Medicaid redesign team, he put representatives of the hospitals, the nursing homes, the home health care agencies, public health professionals, representatives of the various worker union individuals at the table. He gave them a mission, and he said, you need to get the numbers to this, and you need to work it out amongst yourselves as to how that happens. I think that's the strategy you use when you're discussing how we're going to change the work rules and the provisions as relate to unions in general. You hear people say, get rid of the tri-borough member, we've got to change tenure, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. Those one-off positions aren't going to solve the problem. You need to put a team of people together who are going to hammer out that decision under the direction of the governor. What do I do as a senator? As I would as an assemblyman, I'm an advocate. I fight for those things, those changes that I think make sense, and you try to convince, and you pull together other suburban legislators. You work across the aisle, which is why you don't need hyper-partisan elections, because you want to go across the aisle and reach out, Republican and Democrat, to find the common ground and then move forward on the common ground. I think we have some smaller issues that don't really attract a lot of national general public attention, such as the problems with medical malpractice insurance, which the medical community is furious over. And you need to get the doctors and the lawyers and the insurance company people around the table, and it's difficult negotiations. Nobody ever said it was tough. Nobody said it was easy. It's tough to do these things, but that's the path that we have had in the last couple of years to solve issues. That's what you do going forward. And as a senator, a candidate for Senate, you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. That's ridiculous. You're going to advocate, work, cajole, persuade, do whatever is necessary to help advance these issues and work within a body of people. And that's what a legislator is and does. And the legislator candidate that says, I'm going to do this, is really not being honest with you. No individual legislator can do those things, not even a leader of a legislature, which I was when I chaired the Westchester County Legislature. You still needed 8, 9 other people to agree with you in order to accomplish something. That's why you need cooperation. That's why hyperpartisanship doesn't work. That's why you have the gridlock in Washington you do. That's what's got to change.
Many of us in Westchester County are aware of your long-standing public service. I know I am. You have done so much for us, it's often difficult to keep track of things. What are some of your biggest accomplishments in government, and what are you most proud of?
Well, you know, in everything that I will point to in the next second or two was part of a legislative process where other people were involved at some level. So I don't ever want to act like I take sole credit for these things. My tenure in the county legislature, which included being chairman of the Board of Legislators, as chairman of the Board of Legislators, we cut property taxes 3 consecutive years. That was a significant accomplishment. More generally, we put the meetings of the Westchester County Board of Legislators on TV. That was the first big leap forward in transparency. I don't know how interesting the meetings are to watch, but the bottom line is you got for the first time under my direction the ability to watch your county legislature in action, which you didn't have before. I drafted and we passed legislation that protected the Marshlands Conservancy as passive parkland in perpetuity. It was parkland, but you could use it for picnicking and ball playing. We put in passive parkland. At the time, we were able to save the 76 bus route, which was important to residents in Rye. Now, 12 years later, that bus route has now been eliminated for other reasons with other decision makers, but we were able to succeed at that at the time. In the state legislature, we were able to, under the direction I have, come up with a new governance agreement for the Portchester-Rybrook Library. That governance agreement, having been passed by the state, allows the two communities to work cooperatively to keep that library alive and floating and moving forward. The changes in that library are dramatic since the new governance document went in. We were able to achieve for Rybrook, and to a great extent Rye City and New Rochelle, non-property tax revenue stream. The village of Rybrook has gone the last 2 years with practically no property tax increase and looks to the future as if it's going to be a number of years before it has a property tax increase of any significance, because we found additional revenue stream that did not hurt the property taxpayer. Those are things that I'm proud of, and I could go on and on. In every one of these things, we worked cooperatively, Joe. We understand there's differences between the parties, and we debate those differences, but we still keep enough of a relationship with each other to say, okay, I can't get everything I want, you can't get everything you want, where's the common ground, how do we find it? And when we find it, we accomplish things as I've described. I've credited the governor, and I've referenced things in my own career. I know that type of strategy works, and it can work in New York State. And I will work hard in the 2-year term, if I'm successful to become a senator, I will work to try to advance that in the Senate. I know we only have a few minutes left, but that to me is the most important message going forward. Keep the partisan rhetoric to a minimum, point out your agreements and disagreements, but find common ground and address the problems, not the personalities and not the politics.
Are there any debates scheduled that you would like to let the voters know about?
Well, I'd hoped we would have, by the time we're talking now, we would have had some September debates, but, unfortunately, we had one scheduled for WVOX. I was ready to go. My opponent did not, go to that debate. But we are going to have some, to my knowledge, on October 14th. There's a debate in New Rochelle at Temple Israel. On the 15th of October, there's a debate in Rye at the middle school. There's going to be debates, as I understand it, in New Rochelle at City Hall, in White Plains, Bronxville, a number of other communities. I think here in the Larchmont-Mamaroneck area, there's a debate scheduled as well. The League of Women Voters, generally speaking, is the prime sponsor for these debates. One of the problems with the debate structure is that you're going to see candidates for the Assembly, candidates for the State Senate, candidates for Congress. In one evening, it's going to go fast, and they're going to say, Congressman, tell us what you're going to do about taxes. You have 30 seconds. And that makes it very difficult to have the kind of dialogue you should have. So I intend to be at as many of these debates as possible, and I intend to make myself available for voters in any format necessary so that come November 6th, they have all the input they feel they need to make a choice. And then whatever happens, you live with the result. Senator, citizen, you live with the result.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to participate here today. I look forward to seeing you out on the trail.
Great. Joe, thank you very much. Thanks. And thank you all for watching. You'll see other programs of Meet the Candidates for different positions and different other candidates, different political parties. Watch all of them. Make the best decision you can on November 6th. I'm George Latimer. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.